Nice to meet you. Hi, everyone. My name is Austin Belzer of Austin B Media, and I am here talking today with the director of Broadway Rising, Amy Rice. Amy, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy Tribeca schedule.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So, for anyone who doesn't know what Broadway Rising is, it's basically a documentary about, well, kind of the intersectionality between Broadway and New York, and did a whole ton of other things. I mean, really, it's about a lot. So it's playing today at the SVA Theater at 5 p.m., which will, it's actually its premiere tonight at 5 p.m. And if you go there, you can catch Amy, Jesse Tyler Ferguson, and other Broadway stars, along with a special performance tonight. But if you can't make it tonight, it'll be playing Thursday at the Angelica at 3:15 and Sunday at noon. Both Thursday and Sunday screenings are both at the Angelica. I think the Thursday screening's at Theater 7, the noon Sunday screening is at Theater 6, or crisscross, either one. They're in the same building. You'll figure it out. So Amy, I've been watching documentaries for about a decade, probably about since 2008. I really haven't noticed a lot of Broadway documentaries, which I found kind of weird. So what inspired the idea to make a Broadway documentary?
I'm a New York filmmaker, and I've lived in New York for almost, over 20 years. And during COVID, I was quarantined with my baby in Oklahoma City with my parents. And I was desperately missing New York during that time. And I was really devastated, by all the media coverage of COVID in New York City and all the lives lost and the trauma. And, it really reminded me of 9/11 when so many lives were lost. And I'm a 9/11 family member. I unfortunately lost my brother at 9/11. And after 9/11, many of my filmmaker friends made documentaries about the story of 9/11 and, New York's healing after 9/11, which, I couldn't participate in at the time because I was personally grieving. And so, as I watched all this media coverage of, the effect of COVID in New York, I knew New York would come back. New York always comes back strong. Yeah. And I thought, okay, this time I want to be a part of telling the story of New York's healing and New York's comeback. And I was simultaneously always Googling, when is Broadway reopening? Because, I knew that once Broadway reopened, then New York was officially back, which meant I could get on a plane with my baby and head back to New York City and finally resume my life. And while I was doing this, I just, happened upon so many different stories about how hard hit the Broadway community was by COVID. On the day that Broadway shut down, over 96,000 people lost their jobs in the industry, and they lost all their side jobs too, which is waiting tables and catering. And so, and I also knew how unbelievably resilient this community was and is. And so I just felt like there was no better lens, to tell the story of New York's comeback than through the Broadway community. And, I reached out to Jesse Tyler Ferguson and Justin Makita, who I had developed some documentary projects with in the past, and I knew about their deep connection and love of Broadway. And they immediately wanted to come on board and work on the project with me. And I also pitched the idea to Sam Bisbee with Park Pictures and Chris Cowan with Station 10. And they immediately got it and wanted, everybody wanted to jump in and help tell this story. And we decided that, we really not only wanted to tell the story about the people we usually associate with Broadway, which are, the performers and the writers and the directors and the producers, but also the people behind the scenes, the crew and the artisans, like the ushers and the stage door security guys and the mom and pop shops making the costumes. And we really wanted to paint a full picture of this community and give them an opportunity to share their story and what they went through during COVID and how they persevered and, their inspiring journey back to opening night.
Yeah. And, as you were talking about that, I was thinking, just last night we had the Tonys, right? Mm-hmm. So I I know Tribeca is usually during that time, but I think it's kind of nice to have a Broadway documentary to be like, here's something you can look at to see what was it like before, musicals. I actually don't know if it's a musical. A Strange Loop won last night.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it's kind of a nice kind of, hey, you watched the 20s last night, you can check out Broadway Rising. Um, but so with that, it's such a multifaceted documentary. It's really got, I've probably said this in probably three separate interviews now, because somebody said it once and I love how he said it. It's got a bunch of layers to it. And so with those layers, how did you kind of control the narrative to where it didn't feel like it was too much to explore in a documentary?
Well, that's a great question and always a great challenge. And it's very funny because you very rarely get to control the narrative in documentary filmmakings, which
Yeah.
which I love in a way. I think, always with documentaries, I always approach it, you have an idea of what the story could be. And, I always cast a very wide net of different subjects and to potentially follow. And, you get on the phone or on Zoom and you talk with them and hear about their story and, hear, if they're open to being filmed and if they're, in verite. And, a lot of people didn't want to be filmed in verite because of COVID as well, COVID
Yeah.
protocols. And then it's just like it's like a step by step. You kind of test the waters with every subject, and you do a little bit of test filming and see where the story's going. And just I think the biggest challenge as a documentary filmmaker is to kind of let go and let the story unfold, and to document it as you go along, and the narrative will pretty much dictate itself to you.
Yeah, that's probably, yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the most apt description of documentary filmmaking is like you have almost no control because somebody might come up, an interviewee might come up and like in this interview, I also come up with questions on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just this ever evolving thing of you're basically the interviewer and you're like, hey, they said a really cool thing about this. Let me take a mental note of that and come back to that later. And that might
Yeah.
be a big part of a bigger story thread you might want to follow maybe with I don't know any theater companies in New York, but say they mentioned Playbill or something. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that would be something to explore if they said something about that. Um,
Right.
and because I imagine that Playbill got hit hard too.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
um, and then I know you've already kind of answered it, but I kind of want to dig deeper into the Broadway and its relationship to New York. Can you
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit more about just kind of how maybe just your personal feelings about Broadway in New York and how those two areas come together in this kind of union?
I mean, it's one of our subjects in the documentary says, Broadway is the heartbeat of New York City. And it is. That's how I grew up watching movies. I learned that through movies and stories and, and the history that I read about New York. And, they say the purest form of human connection and storytelling is Broadway and theater. And we were robbed of that for a year. And I think that as a filmmaker, storytelling is so very important to me, and it's so important to tell all stories from all perspectives. And Broadway is doing that. And New York City is filled with so many stories from all over the world. And I feel like that is to me how Broadway and New York is connected. And then, from a very, from an economical perspective, it's, Broadway provides a huge economy to New York City. People travel from all over the world to come here to see shows, and they go stay in hotels and eat in our restaurants and go travel over the city. And so, New York City and Broadway are very, very interconnected culturally and economically, I think.
Yeah, I remember a lot when I was you talked earlier about news reports coming out of New York. I remember, even though I'm in Arkansas, I remember hearing a lot about. I think it was Mayor De Blasio at the time, and he was talking about uh, every time he'd go into a press conference, he'd say, "We've got to get Broadway back open. We've got to get it back open. That'll restart the heart of New York." I think it's the kind of verbiage he used. So you've got a lot of producers who are either involved with Broadway or just love Broadway. So how did it feel to get those producers that were not just like, "Hey, here, we'll produce it because we like the story," but also, "Hey, we've been a part of Broadway in the past."
It was really, really wonderful and helpful to have, producers on board who are connected to Broadway, like, Jesse and Justin, because, half your job as a documentary filmmaker is finding your subjects and getting access to your subjects and and building a relationship with your subjects so they feel comfortable sharing their story with you. And the fact that this idea is coming through Jesse and Justin and they support it, it really opened many doors. Many people in the Broadway community felt comfortable and really open to sharing their stories with us. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I imagine they might have even been like, "Hey, I have no insight into this, so you can correct me if I'm wrong." But Jesse might have even been like, "Hey, look here. Maybe this will be good to look into." One really quick softball, then, Amy. It's probably a cliche question. You'll probably get it 100 times today. But you talk about Broadway, and I want to ask, what was your favorite Broadway show?
Ooh, favorite Broadway show. Oh, that's so hard. All of them. Well, I haven't seen any of the shows that we followed yet because I was so busy. The nights that they reopened, those were our busiest nights of filming. So I was, and I had plans. Once I said after the Tribeca Film Festival is done, I'm going to go see all the shows that we followed that are still open. Yes, I'm a huge fan of all the Broadway shows I've ever seen. I think obviously one of the most, I'm a fan favorite of Hamilton for sure. I guess who isn't these days, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I cannot wait to get back to Broadway now that my project is done and I will have the time to do so.
Yeah, that sounds like, what's on your list?
I want to go see Six, and I want to see Wicked. I saw Wicked a long time ago. I want to go see it again. I want to see Strange Loop, which is one last night. Yeah. I did see Take Me Out, which was amazing. Obviously, Jesse. Oh, yeah, I did have music Take Me Out. Yes, that's just in Hades Town, and yeah, that's just a few.
Yeah, I'm sure the list is like probably taller than the building I'm in.
Yes.
But Amy, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a true pleasure. If I could talk about Broadway all day, I would. I could even probably go into some more recent developments of Broadway, but that would take too long. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was so wonderful meeting you.
Thanks, Austin.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you to Amy Rice, the director of Broadway Rising, for joining me on that interview today. And thank you for listening. I hope you subscribe. I've got a bunch of other interviews coming out here. Some audio interviews, some video interviews. I'm kind of experimenting. Anyways, thanks to Thomas Stone Judge from Movies for Real, Shane Kanto from The Wasteland Reviewer, and among very other things. Joseph Davis, David Walters, and Beulah, and Matthew Simpson for supporting me on Patreon. And you can find me on patreon.com/austinbmedia as well as austinb.media. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Until next time, see ya.